In some parts of Acholi, especially the eastern parts of northeastern parts of Acholi, Agabo and the rest, they used not to bury such people. The dead is taken and put under a tree, covered with thorns and all the like. It's called Kibaka. And in anticipation that the spirits of that day, in its existence in the wilderness, will find its revenge. So, what do I say here? No innocent person can be victimized in the 24th. And you cannot just argue if you are guilty and say, I never did anything. Even after 10, 15, 20, 100 years, your collective or your clan will be held responsible and accountable.
So any other form, I have heard the one where you say they bury outside. I've heard the one you say they hid things in the eastern part of Acholi. Any other form?
Under exceptional circumstances, like war, in Acholi many people were buried without taking care of those rituals, rites and rituals. And sometimes it becomes difficult in certain types of conflict to determine who exactly is the perpetrator. So such people first go through a process, we call it moil. They go through a cleansing of the dead, and this cleansing is very elaborate. It could start by calling the spirit of the dead, we call it corruptible. Through diviners, there are special people, specialists. And when you speak to the dead, they ask the dead if he has any issue with over his death. If they say that, the dead says, I just died because it was a misfortune, I got caught up, then such a person has no issue. He's buried normally because they anticipate that he will not come to seek revenge.
This area you have gone that you ask them, how do you ask them? Through what medium do you do that?
I think this is something that is becoming common in the world. We have specialists. Just like in any discipline, we have heart specialists, brain specialists. We also have spiritual specialists. I have read and heard extensively in the US in the course of my work. They are called psych detectives. So these psych detectives, psych detectives, apply metaphysical inferences to communicate with the dead so that they are able to determine what the dead feel about their death. First of all, there is an agreement within the family or the clan that we need to approach the dead so that we find out from the dead what he feels about his death. And they select a few, 3 or 4 or so people to approach a diviner. I don't want to call them witch doctors, they are diviners, because they are mediums between us and our spirit world. Now, the representatives go to the mediums, and the mediums go through a process. I've not witnessed it as the mediums go through a process in a special hut or special room, using certain articles. Could be a guard, a small guragwad, could be a drum, and they chant calling the dead. And the dead comes, and you speak to the dead. The diviner speaks to the dead, explaining why they are calling the dead, and asking the dead if there's anything that they have not done regarding its death, so that whatever is determined is conclusive.
Any other ritual that is performed?
So even unknown bodies is buried, but buried in the wilderness. and that area is cleansed using a sheep. It is usually animal sacrifice. The boils and blood is sprinkled so that you appease both the spirit but also cleanse any evil that may come out of the realms. As part of my work under the Northern Uganda Transition Initiatives, we did a lot of area cleansing, Moyoping, because there were so many bones we found unburied, and people could not go back to those areas in fear of evil.
Culturally, is there any way, any specific way maybe these bodies are handled before burial?
Anybody is supposed to be handled decently. You must collect it decently.
I'm interested in where its cause of death is in the dispute.
Amero tutwaleni keme kama twaito mano peki ye kimotimenyo mo pereye.
Part of the chanting where, for instance, you don't know who the person killed is that you go and find the person or the persons or the people responsible for your death. Yeah. And it is in the chanting. As you do the animal sacrifice and those rituals, rites and rituals, and the sprinkling the blood and the card in the stomach, the card, you chant.
You have testified about you're buried outside. If maybe there's family intervention, somebody was buried outside the compound, and there is now intervention and there is restoration. How do you deal with that body which is outside?
The person is exhumed and buried in the compound, and the usual rites of death, rituals of death, and honoring the dead takes place. Remember, when somebody is buried unconventionally, that burial is incomplete. You cannot proceed on with the other rituals of honoring the dead. The most important ritual is the last funeral rites. Yeah, and then, because after you have completed, the person is now, the spirit can now come back home and commune normally amongst these people.
What if, what to explain to court, what if these rituals of matoput, these rituals of reconciliation are not done?
Let me give you two contexts. If it is done wrongly, for instance, the wrong person is punished. You have done nothing. If the dead chooses to seek vengeance, it will still do its vengeance. The unfortunate acts will continue. Now, if it is not done at all, obviously the curse continues. And those are serious consequences, because it will be the bad things will befall. I don't know whether I'm using the right. Bad things will befall that clan or the family. The consequences for doing wrong, or the consequences for not doing it are so dire to our society.